Okay, I think we got it. How's everybody doing this evening, Saturday evening? It's Howard with a serious dye job and a haircut. I'm just kidding. Steve K1GMM, for those of you that have seen the stream before, with Howard Stern. Making a guest appearance. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But it is not Howie today. We have a very exciting thing where a friend of mine's going to present. His name's Roland, and I corrected his call. My apologies to Roland. I was working off his email. I had to correct it in the stream prior, about maybe a half hour ago to an hour ago. Echo India 5 Kilo Bravo is his call. He's over in Ireland, and he's going to be sharing with us his experiences and knowledge regarding diversity receive systems. All kinds of cool stuff are going to get presented here. So get your notepads. And if you guys have any questions, I will be monitoring the chat, and we've already pre-discussed everything before just a few minutes ago, how we're going to do this. I'm going to just let him rip, and if I have any questions, I'm going to jot them down on the pad, and I'll keep track of the chat, and when he gets finished with an individual section, topic, whatever he's working on, I will go ahead and interject, but I am not going to interrupt him midstream, because we all know what that does to me. So... We'll see you guys. Hopefully, everything will stay connected. We had a little bit of a foobar last night with disconnection, so hope this goes okay. Welcome, everybody on the stream. I'll just jump in really quick. I know Polly Cracker's in there. Glenn, Chris, how you doing? And Andy, good to see you guys. And so, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Roly, and he can just have at it, man. And you guys give him a welcome. And he was kind enough to do this. And remember, we were chatting a while back about maybe doing some interviews or something like that. Well, it's happening, and this is very exciting for me, especially because this is a subject that I have been really interested in. I don't know a lot about it. So here we go. Go ahead. Wait for the... where am I? Here we go. Go ahead, Roly. It's all yours, man.
All right. Thanks very much, Steve. And good evening, everybody. First of all, I'd just like to thank Steve for asking me to come along onto his channel. I've been watching him for a while, and it's a great channel. It's a lot of fun. It's really informative, and you guys know a lot more about it than I do, but it's my pleasure to be here tonight. And if I can disseminate any little gem, any little piece of information which is going to help you, well, that's great. As I was saying to Steve only yesterday, I'm not a live by the sword amateur radio operator. I'm not going to confuse the issue with science and calculations and whiteboards and markers and diagrams. We're going to try and keep this really simple, because that works for my brain, and that's what I like to do. I've been a ham for probably about 14 years. And before that, I was always interested in SWL. I was interested in 11-meter radio. I was working in the broadcast industry as a radio presenter, a DJ in, HCR formats and things like that. So I was always into radio. And when I got out of the radio business, amateur radio seemed like the right thing to be able to keep my interest, whet the appetite, and have enough of an involvement in radio to satisfy my needs. And that's kind of what's brought me to where I am today. I live in a rural location. I've got a modest sized property, and I've been really fortunate that for many, many years, I had a really super low noise floor. You know, when you turn on your radio and you don't hear any of the chainsaw action in the back, you know, when you don't hear the when you just hear the smooth espresso machine hiss, that creamy hiss on a HF Spectrum band. That's what I had. I was so fortunate. One day I came into my Radio Shack. I swung the beams around into North America, see what was going on, maybe check in with a few of the boys, have a bit of a chat. And as I swung the beams around, the S meter just started to climb. And it would be no exaggeration, I was sitting on about 14,200 thereabouts. And the S meter sat stable, listening to a chainsaw kind of a sound at about 9+5 dB. And I just kind of said, wow, huh, oh, oh boy, what's going on here? The noise floor would normally be like in realistically about a 0 to maybe a 1.5. So what happened was that I eventually sourced where it was coming from. I got in touch with all the usual local authorities and all that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, they weren't in a hurry to do much for me. I wanted to keep my station on the air. I had to do something. It was really getting quite difficult. I was hearing this on the back of the beams. I was hearing this even on the side of the beam. It was deflecting, but every day it was on and off. It was on and off. It was even stronger as I moved up into the higher bands. I was getting 10/9, 15/9, even on 6 meters, 20/9. And this was a wide band source. I did a little bit of covert investigation. I found out where it was coming from. I took my notes. I did all the things you're meant to do. I disconnected my house, checked all the power supplies, wall warts, everything, Wi-Fi, everything and anything. Ran the place off a battery. And so I knew where it was coming from, but it was to try and get my local authority, the Irish equivalent of the FCC, to do something about it. But they were slow. So I had to do something myself. Otherwise, I had to take up golf. Can't play golf. So I was left with one choice. So I kind of got into the internet. I got into books. I got into reading, got out all the old magazines, and then I sorted out and I found about phase noise cancellation. And it was pretty simple stuff. It was a simple circuit which brought a second simultaneous signal into the radio, but you have the control to adjust its phase and its strength or magnitude. You can adjust both of those on a simultaneously received signal. So I thought this was kind of interesting. I read up a little bit more about it and I said, okay, well, we'll give this a go. And then I found out about the MFJ 1025, the MFJ 1026, the time wave ANC5, and various other devices. There's a big radio company in Germany called Wemo, and they make what's called a QRM eliminator. And they all have the same thing. It's a simple phase noise cancellation circuit. So what did I do? I went straight out and I got one. And then, of course, I realized that the next step was that I would need a second antenna to pick up the noise. So that's the first caveat. So I'm just using this as a little bit of an intro, just to give you a bit of background as to how I got into this. And what we're going to show you tonight is how you can do it in the old analog style, like I started off at. And then we're going to get down to the nitty gritty and the real dirty stuff. And we're going to do it and show you how you practically get this application running in OpenHB-SDR or in your Thetis or even in your SDR Uno, anything that has two analog to digital converters. If you have a radio with two ADCs, you can do this. And I swear by it. It works beautifully. But as I say, and I want to stress, the really important thing is that you don't need an Apache ANAN. You don't even need an SDR, because we can do this if you get an MFJ 1025, 26, or a time wave or something like that. Just Google maybe phase noise cancellation unit, and you'll see them coming up. I've seen them for like 35 to 50 euro. I don't know what that is in dollars, but maybe about 50 or 60 bucks. There or thereabouts. So it's not expensive, and we'll show you the science behind it. And I'll tell you how well it works, some of the caveats and some of the little tricks to make it really, really perform. You might find that you've got a noise source which has been just popped up, just out of the blue. You were having a great time on the radio, chatting with your friends every day, maybe on 15 or 20 or down on 80 or wherever. And all of a sudden, this is just sort of taking the gloss off it. And you're coming in and your head is wrecked with this noise every single day. You can do something about it, and you can do a lot more about it than your noise blanker or your DSP or your noise reduction will ever do. You can actually eradicate it. but there's a couple of steps. So taking that as a kind of an intro, I want to get Steve, if you wouldn't mind, Steve, could you pull up slide number 1 for me there? Because this is the statement. This is what it's all about. This is the crux of it. And I cannot stress this first slide enough, okay? And I'm going to read this out maybe 2 or even 3 times to myself so I can get my own head around it, because, as I said, I'm not a live by the sword ham radio operator. I'm a simple guy, all right? So to make this work on your noise sensing antenna, which we're going to talk about shortly, about this second antenna you got to put together. On your noise sensing antenna, you must receive the QRM, the offending noise, at the same level or stronger than what you're getting at on your standard everyday transmit receive antenna. So say you got a G5RV, or you got an end-fed wire, or you got a hex beam, or you got whatever you got, or you got a vertical, maybe you got a gap type, maybe, wow, that'd be nice. But your everyday workhorse main multiband antenna or even monoband antenna. So say you're getting an S9 of noise. Maybe it's only an S6, but maybe it's an S9. Let's just use S9 as an average and a round number. So you come in and you see 20 meters. We'll use 20 meters as an example as well. So you come in and all of a sudden somebody's rained on your parade because they've either got maybe a plasma TV, they got a bad boiler thermostat, they got some LED lights, maybe you got somebody with a grow house down the road, hopefully not, but maybe you got a bad utility pole or a generator or something, and you got an S9 of noise. What are you going to do about it? You're going to build, if you want to go this route, you're going to build a noise sensing antenna, which is going to pick up the noise at an S9 or stronger. That is the minimum requirement. Now, I'll tell you why. I'll tell you exactly why. Because with these units, what you do, whether you do it in the software on the Apache or whether you're doing it manually with an MFJ 1025 or 26 or whatever, you're bringing in 2 simultaneous signals, you're locking them together, and you're flipping them, one of them out of phase by 180 degrees. This is the science bit. It's like one of those shampoo commercials when the girl turns around and says, here's the science bit, okay? So to get that shine and to reduce the noise, you got to have a noise sensing antenna that will pick up the noise exactly as well as your standard end-fed that you use every day, your workhorse antenna, your everyday aerial. So the reason why, so we flip that to 180 degrees out of phase. So you have -9 of noise, S9 of noise coming in on your noise sensing antenna, and you put that against your +9 of noise on your main antenna, and what happens? That's exactly what happens. They both meet in the middle and give you 0. +9 of noise, -9 of noise because it's shifted into 180 degrees. So you've got your noise sensing antenna here, your main antenna here. Flip it to 180 degrees and cancel, and you get nothing. 9 from 9 leaves 0. The noise is gone. If your noise sensing antenna is only picking up the noise at an S6, you take 6 from 9, you're going to be left over with 3 S units of noise. So let's just read it one more time, because I'm a fool, to be honest with you. To make this work on your noise sensing antenna, you must receive the QRM at the same level or stronger than your main TX-RX antenna. Okay? So now you're probably thinking, oh man, this is great, but I'm going to have to put together a whole incredible antenna that's going to pick up the noise. Well, yes and no. The noise is going to be local, but 9 times out of 10, the wanted signal, the person you want to talk to is not local. They're either DX, intercontinental, continental on the same continent, or they are NVIS. So they're usually far further away than the noise. The noise is 9 times out of 10 ground wave. It's, as I say, it's a neighbor with a bad TV, bad thermostat, a utility pole, whatever it might be. LED lighting is what that is. That is the evil. that is the Dungeons and Dragons of QRM. They really are, and it's not even the LED light. It is the switch mode power supplies that run those lights. They drop the voltage down, and they're dirty, and they put it back into the mains, and they radiate. And that's what you're capturing. It's not really actually the LED element at all. But that's beside the point. The beauty of doing phase noise cancellation is that the beauty of it is really, especially about putting this noise sensing antenna together. Can I put a proposition to you? So say you have an end-fed wire as your mainstay everyday antenna, or a G5RV, or a hex beam, or the Gap Titan. So you have any of these antennas, and you have them hooked up with, maybe RG213, or you might have a nice ladder line, or whatever you got on a doublet maybe, and everything is really done, because you're shunting maybe 100 watts, maybe 500 or 600 watts, maybe even the full legal limit, maybe 1.5K is going up and down this bad boy every day when you're talking to your friends. With a noise sensing antenna, here's 2 advantages to make it easy to install it. Number 1, it doesn't have to be able to pick up your DX buddy. It only has to be able to pick up the noise. And number 2, you will never transmit. You'll never transmit through the noise sensing antenna. So you can make it on a budget. You can make it as cheap as chips. You can make it on a dirty bit of old ragged twin lead, some old light TV, sat coax, anything you want, anything you got lying around, make it out of some bare wire. It doesn't have to be anything special because you're never going to pump RF through it. All you want it to do is pick up the noise. So you see, there's the major advantage. You can even, do the feed point with just a little electrical connection. You just wind them together, whatever, just to try it out. Now, here's the other advantage. Because you're only trying to pick up the noise with this aerial, you don't have to install it on your tower or on your mast or out of your tree or on a pole or on your tripod. You can run it along the back fence. You can run it across. If you have an end-fed wire that's maybe running north-south, you put a wire kind of beside it or underneath it, running the same direction or at right angles to it. You can run it across to a tree, into the ditch, maybe some hedges or shrubs at the back of the place, or you can tack it along a fence if you have to. You're never going to transmit through this, and you don't want to hear people on it. You just want to hear the noise, but you want to hear the noise as strong as your main antenna can pick it up. But you probably will, because the noise is local. It's only going to be, 9 times out of 10, you see people with a really bad noise problem. It's kind of a situation that, well, I went out down the corner of the street, and there was the pole buzzing away like a bad boy, and it's nearly always very, very close by, or somebody with a bad TV. So anyway, you could even make a little half-wave dipole. If your noise is only coming in on one band, you only need a noise antenna for one band. Cut yourself a little 20-meter dipole, say about 17 or 18 feet each side, and you could put it up on the, you could tack it to the apex of your house coming down the sides. You could run along the gutter. If you've got interference on the 10-meter band, you could maybe put up a small vertical. Verticals are great for picking up noise, and they're omnidirectional. They listen all around the place. They're really good. So maybe you could just put a quarter wave in the back corner of your yard. And again, as I say, it's never going to be transmitted through. You don't need a big elaborate ground mat. It doesn't have to be super efficient. It's only listening out for the noise. So there you go. To make this work, our target is to get the noise sensing antenna to receive the noise at the same strength as your main everyday aerial, or close to it, or better than it if possible. I'll let you in on a secret. I built a noise sensing antenna that was a multi-bander because I was getting wiped out on quite a number of bands. And as it moved into the higher bands, it just wasn't so hot. It wasn't receiving the noise really well. So I got a really cheap preamp and I threw that in line. And where the noise was only coming in on the noise sensing antenna at about an S6 or an S7, I just flipped on the little preamp, ramped up the noise to about 10/9 and canceled it out completely. So that's what we're going to do. You got an S9 of noise here. You got an S9 of noise on your noise sensing antenna. You flip it 180 degrees, and then you adjust the gain of the two antennas so they match, and then you cancel that and you reach 0. If you have a little bit less, you'll get what they call like a residue, a leftover bit of noise. But, you know, an S2, maybe an S3 of noise isn't, you know, it's not too much of a bother. And maybe you could hit it with a noise blanker or some kind of a DSP, and that would help you out, and it'll be good enough. But that's our target. In an ideal world, that's what we're looking to do. So maybe Steve could flip it over to the next one, the next slide, slide number 2, which is a little diagram I put together this afternoon for you, just so you can have a little bit of a look and see what we're going to do. Now, what we're going to do in a little while is get specific about doing this with software using OpenHBSDR on the Apaches, and we'll show you about that. But as I say, and we stressed this very strongly, you don't have to have an SDR radio to join in tonight's bit of fun, okay? Not needed. You get your noise canceling unit and away we go, and this is how you do it. This is the diagram. And what you have here, okay, so let me just run you through it. You got a dipole representation on the top left-hand side, and it says A, main antenna. So that's the antenna we were talking about. That is your everyday workhorse. That's your, could be a hex beam, could be a dipole, a doublet, end-fed, whatever. I just used a dipole, G5RV. So there it is. That's your main everyday antenna. And then across from that, you've got your noise antenna. I just used a tiny little vertical as representation. That's marked B. And they both come down to the little phasing unit, which is three controls on the front of it there. They plug into the back of that, and you have a gain and a phase. They usually give you 2 phase and a gain, so you can adjust all the parameters. Now, it can be tricky, and it takes a little while to get the hang of it. And the first time you probably do it, you go, oh, this is nonsense, this isn't going to work. And then you kind of come back to it 2 or 3 times later, and all of a sudden, you hit a sweet spot, and you just see that noise drop, and then you move it again. It's, you know what it's really akin to? You know what it's really like? It's like matching an antenna with an ATU. You know, you turn the big crank wheel to get the inductor in the right place, and then you go on the fine tune, and you're nudging it down, you peak it up, you nudge it down, you peak it up, you nudge it down, and all of a sudden you got a flat SWR. It's a little bit like doing that, but you're nulling the noise down all the time. So you got your controls, and as I say, the middle box there with the 3 knobs is representative of, when you see there's going to be a rush on eBay for MFJ 1026s in the next few days. So what you do anyway is you pipe that in as is, and then you put it into the back of your radio, and it'll also come with a little PTT relay line. And what that'll do is when you transmit on your radio, it'll shut off antenna B, the noise antenna. It'll shut it off completely, so it won't take in any RF and allow it back into the unit or to your radio. That might damage the front end of your radio or the actual noise cancelling unit itself. So that is the setup diagram for the traditional non-ANAN setup, how you might do this if you've got maybe, say, a Kenwood 850, an 870, or a Yaesu, or whatever you got, okay? And you can do this, and it works beautifully. Again, as I say, if you're able to pull in the noise at a decent level, equal to what you're getting on your main one, better, or close to, you're really very good. So that's the setup on the on what I would call the legacy one. Now, let me just, before we go to the next slide, let me just explain one thing to you, which is interesting. Now, you might be sitting there saying, but I don't have any noise. I have a little bit of noise, but it doesn't really bother me. You can also use phase noise cancellation as opposed to getting them and canceling them out. You can have your wanted signal of S9, and if you make a noise sensing antenna that happens to maybe pick up a DX, or one of the people you want to talk to, maybe a 3 or a 4, instead of flipping it out of phase, you can leave it in phase, and you can combine the two signals. So one antenna is receiving an S9 and the other antenna is receiving maybe an S3, but maybe band conditions are really quite poor, or they're quite tough, and he's fading in and out. And you might just, by adding in that second antenna, and as opposed to nulling out the signal of the second antenna, by combining it, you get enough signal from the two antennas combined to actually just pop that station over the threshold of the noise floor. And that might be the difference in a DXCC or not. And it may very well be, you know, you could be trying to work one of these real tough ones like Bouvet, or somewhere that's meant to be coming up in the next while, and he's way in the back of the radio on the gap tighten, and all of a sudden you bring in that second antenna and you just peak him out there because you just added another couple of dB onto the second antenna. So it's not just about getting rid of noise. There's other things that you can do with it. If you've got a lot of cross polarization, if somebody is really suffering on fading, you might see, wow, when he fades on one antenna, he doesn't fade on the other. And I'm getting fed up switching from one antenna to the other. And you can combine the two. And again, instead of flipping it out of phase, you can leave it in phase. And what will happen there is that one antenna will be listening really good when the signal bounces in, horizontally polarized, or it might be twisting, and the other antenna will be listening real good vertical. And what you'd find overall is that you have far less fading and a far more comfortable copy. And what you'll also find as well is, I think you'll find that you actually open the window of opportunity, the opening of the band will be just a little bit longer, a little bit earlier, and a little bit longer at the front and the back of that, because your sensitivity has been increased by using two antennas. Excuse me. So you find yourself in a situation where this is doing a number of things for you already, not just getting rid of your noise. Now, if Steve, maybe you can pull up slide number 3. The next one on the list, I think, is getting into the Apache stuff. Oh, here we go. Okay, so we're getting down and dirty now. We're gonna see if we can kind of translate that analog system into the Apache software. Now, let me just say on the outset of this, we're not just talking Apaches. We're talking SDR Unos, maybe some of the Sun SDRs, any radio with 2 independent ADCs. The really, really old Apache 100 comes with 1 ADC. You cannot do this with the really old 100. You need 2 ADCs. So you need a 100D, or you need an old 100 with 2 ADCs before they turned it into what's called a D. The 200s, the 7000s, the 8000s, the Andromedas, they'll all do this. They've all got 2 independent ADCs. And what that second ADC is allowing you to do, once you hook up your noise antenna to it, it is allowing you to capture and grab that exact same simultaneous signal, but give you the same control in the software, the exact same control that you have on your MFJ 1025 or your ANC time wave or whatever it may be. It's giving you that, but it's doing it in a super convenient manner. I remember coming into my shack when I had my QRM eliminator and my MFJ, and you come in and you pick the band you want to operate on, and the noise is there, and you got to go to your little settings. You might have a cheat sheet, and you go to your little settings, you're going to nudge it out, and if you wanted to move up the band, you had to nudge it out again. Or if you would say, oh, well, 20 is not great, I'll go to 17 or I'll go to 40, then you have to zzz. I kind of found myself in a situation where it was working, and it was working really very well. But it was kind of time consuming to come into the shack, get rid of the noise. It was just taking a little bit of time. And that's why I said I'd push on, and I needed something a bit more efficient. And then I found out 2 ADCs, I could do it in open HBSDR. You can do it whether you're running protocol 1, protocol 2, whether you're running open HBSDR, or whether you're running Thetis as well. You can do it in any of these. And it's super easy. You can do it in many different configurations depending on how many antennas you have. And I'm just going to show you the simplest one tonight. If you're an Apache operator and you've kind of opened up that phasing control window a couple of times, but you've never really done much with it, maybe now is your chance to see if you'd like to kind of have a play with it. So let me just read the card and what it says here. Apache Anon setup rear panel. So on the rear panel of the Apache, the main antenna, so your everyday workhorse, your end-fed or your hex beam or whatever it is, your G5, is going to go into antenna socket 1. Okay, crystal clear, antenna socket 1. Your noise sensing antenna is going to go into RX2. Note I said RX2. I didn't say your noise antenna was going to go to antenna 2, because there is an antenna 2. I said RX2. Caveat. Place where a lot of people fall down. I put antenna 1 into antenna 1. I put antenna 2 into antenna 2. And they wonder why. You need to go to RX1. But not only that, then you got to go into HBSDR setup. At the top left, if you're an Apache operator, you'll know exactly where it is. It's the very top left icon. Right up in the top left corner, it says setup. Just hit that tab. When you hit that tab, you'll get another little window, and that'll show you all your options there. You hit general, hit the general tab, and then you see ADC tab. You go into the ADC tab, and I just want you to move one button, and you may not even have to do it. It might already be done for you. And all you got to do is you just got to assign. Oh, hang on. Ooh, oh, there he is. He's going to do it for me now. I want you to assign RX1 to ADC1, RX2 to ADC2. And that's exactly as Steve has it there up on the window for you. So you can see exactly where we're coming from now. So what's going to happen is that your transmit receive on your workhorse antenna is going to come up on RX1, which is your antenna 1 or antenna 2 or antenna 3 or antenna 4, depending on your configuration. But more importantly, your ADC2 is now assigned to RX2 socket. And that is the socket which is furthest most on the right-hand side, beside the power cord at the Apache. It's the last one. It's closest to the power cord, and the rest of they're all lined up beside each other. So once you have that done, you are then ready to roll. And things start getting quite exciting then, because what you have done is you've done the equivalent of all the physical connections, you've done the software connections, and you can now open up the phasing window. And the phasing window is more diversity. Again, up in the top menu, you'll see it just says diversity. Maybe, yeah, there you go, Steve. And if you just open up that top window there, beautiful. Okay, here we go. There's the diversity window. Now, let me talk you through the diversity window. If you just leave that there, Steve, this will be very cool indeed. Okay, so the first thing we have is the shift. You can see the shift and the phase. That column, I'll be honest with you, I don't pay too much attention to that because it changes as you move around, but it's not really configurable, okay? What I'm more interested in is you see the section there where it says receiver source. So receiver source, here's your options. RX1 and RX2, or you can have receiver 1 and receiver 2, and then you have your reference down below here. You have receiver 1 and receiver 2 again. You can lock the phase and you can lock the gain. All right, and you have an enable and a disable button. It's as simple as that. And let me just talk you through it. We go to the receiver source. We want it on RX1 and RX2, because what we're doing then is we're allowing both the noise sensing antenna and your main workhorse antenna to combine together. If you want to see what's happening on your main everyday antenna, just hit receiver 1. It's like an A-B switch between the two antennas. Receiver 1 is the everyday antenna, or you can highlight receiver 2 and it'll listen individually to receiver 2 antenna, your noise sensing antenna. So you can jump between the two to see what both are doing. But for phase noise cancellation, we want to go to RX1 plus RX2 because we're interested in combining them. Now, here's the interesting bit down here, the reference source, okay? You can subtract either from the other. You can subtract what the noise sensing antenna is hearing from the main antenna, or you can subtract what the main antenna is hearing from the noise antenna. I would recommend the former because we've gone to a lot of trouble to build our aerial, which has been tacked along the fence at the back, picking up the noise, or it's maybe hidden in the loft, or it's out the front in the hedge, hanging out of a tree. And again, I stress, we're never going to transmit through this noise sensing antenna, so it's got to be nothing fancy. It can just be a piece of wire. As long as you can terminate it off there into the back of the unit with 50 ohms and it can hear the noise, you're good. So we want to put our reference to receiver 2. If we put our reference to receiver 2, we combine the receiver source RX1 and RX2. What it's going to do then, when we move the target around the site, around the bullseye, maybe you could move that around there, Steve, just to show. If you go clockwise or anti-clockwise, you're shifting the phase. When you go around anti-clockwise or clockwise, you're shifting the phase. When you move it in and out, from the outer edge to the center of the circle, you're adjusting the gain between the two antennas. How much one is listening compared to the other, and then the phase that they're listening in. So in practical terms, you have RX1 and RX2, and you enable it, and your reference source is 2. So you're taking the noise antenna, subtracting that from what the main antenna is hearing, which is the noise, which you want to get rid of. And then you swing around and you look for the null. Once you find a null, it's just a case of fine tuning. It's a little bit like the ATU scenario we were talking about previously. You might need to nudge it in or add a little bit. You can lock the phase. There's a lock option for both the phase and also there for the gain. Or you might decide, okay, the phase is good, so we'll lock that and I'll adjust the gain between the two antennas, and you find the null. And then once you're in that position, then you are pretty much, you are good to go. What you will see is you'll see your pan adapter. If you have a highly effective noise sensing antenna, you will actually see your pan adapter as you look from left to right, right across the band. If you look at, if like Steve has it there, if you're really zoomed out quite a bit, you will actually see the pan adapter tilting ever so slightly as you move. See the way it's level right the way across from the left to the right of the screen? You'll actually see it just tilting ever so slightly as you hit that null, and you'll see the noise floor dropping out of it. Now, you can use this to notch things out if you have just a couple of spurs on the band that are annoying you. Maybe there's a net that you like on a certain band and it's on a certain day and it just happens to get killed by a spur. So you can notch out that spur. Or what you can do as well is you can, wow, there you go. That's when you get a senior moment. What you can also do, let me just figure this one out. Oh yeah, there was one other thing. I knew there was something distracting me. What it's really good at doing What it's incredibly good at doing is if you have a single solitary noise source. Now, maybe you have a couple in your neighborhood that is a bother, but maybe you have just a single solitary noise source. Well, then it's just going to nail that and just knock it on the head. If you have multiples, they'll all be coming in at different phases. So I must admit, and I'll make no excuses about it, but you do find yourself in a situation that you could knock out one noise, but you could still have another because its orientation and its phase will be different to the one that you're locked onto. So it's only really, if you got a bad substation down the road, or you got bad TV down the road, or it's got to be kind of a single source noise. So I think
Can I jump in quick, Roly?
I think I'm nearly wrapped.
Yeah. I'll remember where you're at, but you caught. That was one of the questions I was going to have, because I don't want to blow smoke up anybody's butt here, but that explains why I have seen that before, where there's obviously multiple noise sources. That was a question I wrote down. Why is it that some noise sources I can eliminate completely? Other noise sources, there's something going on that I have that comes and goes here. I don't know what. Well, I know what one of them is. One of them's the Keurig coffee maker. If I had my wife turn that on and I lit up the pan adapter, you'd see what happens. It's a mess. And I think it's got multiple switching power supplies in it, kind of like a plasma TV, because it looks like a plasma TV when it lights up on the pan adapter. Now, I can deal with that, but there's another noise source that's coming from somewhere. I can't get rid of both of them at the same time. And that's what you're saying, right? It has to do with they're probably out of phase to each other. And so
Absolutely.
You can only deal with the correction on one phase at a time.
Exactly, because you're in one position. And that's where I was so fortunate, because as I say, I'm out in the country. I had silky smooth listening for many a year. And all of a sudden this thing came on, but it was just one source from one position being generated all the time. And even though it was only one source, it was wide band. It was sitting on the guts of maybe about 17 meg wide, and maybe even a little bit further, but I wasn't interested in what was happening beyond it. But because it was coming from the one source, I could hit its phase and I could just knock it out. So yeah, you kind of got to pinpoint. You've got to really sort of look for your worst offending noise. Hopefully you don't have too many of them, but look for your worst offending noise and say, that's the one we're going to deal with. Or maybe say, for example, maybe the coffee maker is really bad on 40, but it's not objectionable on 20, whereas the fluorescent bulb in your neighbor's garage is more objectionable on 20. So I'll null out the neighbor's fluorescent light on 20, but when I'm on 40, I'll null out the coffee maker. So there are limitations. Yes, there are. But, it's like we were saying the other day, there's people out there that I can't talk to him. You got to be over an S9 to talk to me. This has got to be the holy grail. This has got to be something really good for those kind of cases. For people that have pretty much just one single source that they can't do anything about, or they maybe approached the neighbor's not willing to do anything, or maybe they've approached the FCC.
Come out with a gun.
Willing to do anything. Been there, done that. But, and I did try the softly, and, it just didn't work. And I had to go the route I went. And I was extremely, extremely fortunate. But I would say also that, man, people used to come in my Radio Shack and they'd say, look at the noise. It was unbelievable. I used to post videos of the noise on YouTube and everywhere and here and there to try and create awareness and helping people with it on Facebook. And people would say, they'd say, I've got this really lousy noise come up on the band, maybe on a particular Facebook group. And I'd say, well, post a video of it. Maybe we can identify it and see, or take it from there, or give them the usual steps to try and mitigate it, especially because It's terrible to say, but at least, at least 50% of noise cases are actually being generated in the radio amateur's own home.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
sometimes it's just a super simple fix. But when it's not, that's when this kind of gear comes into its own. And as I said, it's not just about getting rid of noise, it's about maybe catching that elusive signal, a little couple of dB here from a second aerial being combined with what you've got already, putting the two together, getting that opening at the right time, or being able to hold that QSO for that little bit longer because you're listening on two antennas. How cool is that? How many people do you know that are talking to people and listening on two antennas? Unless they're phased, obviously. Maybe they're using a 4 square or a 2 square or whatever. But you know what I mean? To be able to do little things like that, it's neat and it's a lot of fun. It's a nice kind of a project too.
Yeah. That's another. I was going to wait to comment on that, but seeing as how you hit that again, I'm going to go ahead and make a comment about that. The Anon, I first found this out about the Anon, but I don't just do it on the Anon. I actually use the RSP Duo with the 7300 do the exact same thing. There's two comments I have. I'm going to see if I can remember both of them. The first one is you're talking about simultaneously receiving on two different antennas. I had never done that before until I clicked. I was like, what the heck is that multi-RX for on the Anon? Anybody running Anon, let me get over to the pan adapter. What is that for? I had always just used the receive or the diversity. So, I'm sitting here and I've got diversity on and I'm playing with the diversity. And one day I happen to look down and I go, what's a multi-RX for? So I clicked on it and holy mother. Now I didn't have any noise I had to null out at that point. So this is to your point. This is not just for diversity. Yeah, this can work great this is dynamite if you have a noise issue, but if you don't have a noise issue, if you want to listen on cross-polarized antennas, like all my antennas are flat side, but my diversity antenna is actually a 136.6 foot end-fed, and it is a freaking disaster. It is hot on receive on 20 meters and 80 meters. It is cracking on receive, but that thing is the noisiest freaking antenna I've ever heard in my life. It picks up stuff that my other antennas don't even pick up, or dead quiet. And that thing hears all kinds of crap coming in, as well as signal though, right? But I look at the signal strength, and I've tested both of them, and they're very close. If I have like an S9 signal, yeah, it's noisier, but there's a lot of audio coming through. I hit that multi-RX. Wow. All I can say is wow. That audio, well, it pops. You look at the S meter, and the S meter really doesn't change. But the audio level of the signal, your perception of sheer volume, it's like the difference between going from S9 to 20 over. That's what it's like. When I run that antenna in multi-RX, simultaneously listening on both antennas, it is freaking incredible. And I do it all the time now. Even on the 7300 running the Duo, I actually, a lot of times, I'll run, because you got to understand the Duo is a dual receiver, but it's really designed to run diversity. It's not really meant for listening to the same frequency on the same band simultaneously on one open application. You can do it through the dual mode. You can open multiple applications of SDR Uno, two applications, listen on a completely different band on a separate antenna simultaneously and run all the stuff at the same time with two different antennas. That's great, but what I end up doing is I run the diversity wide open. And I just let her rip. It is active, right? So you have to sweep it on the bullseye here. The Uno's exactly the same way. So I'll take this and I'll sweep it until I get maximum carnage, maximum volume coming out. And I really don't have any noise depending on the band I'm working. And it's almost like what you were saying, where you have situations where signals are coming off the ionosphere. I would say this may be a stretch, but I would say 80 to 90% of the time, it's actually a benefit to me to have both antennas receiving simultaneously. That's how effective it is, right? You'd agree with that?
I would, absolutely, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
So you've seen the same thing.
I have used it. I've used it primarily when I had the noise issue. But yes, I have experimented. Once the noise was gone, I was able to open up the horizon a bit more, you might say. And then I started combining signals, and I started running signals, especially, we're a really interesting band because I had bad noise on 40 and 20 especially. 20 was really bad, but it was also really kind of really just took the fun out of 40 meters on me. So what I found on the 40 meter band was that I was using a flat top rotary dipole on 40 as the main TXR antenna, but I was using a quarter wave vertical as the noise sensing antenna. And if I was talking, say, to some of the boys, if I was running short propagation into, say, the UK, or say Scotland, Isle of Man, or even say Belgium, Denmark, close stuff, the band tends to, over here, the band tends to close down very quickly, very, very quickly. Whereas when I was combining the two antennas or jumping to the other or using a mix of them, I was able to sit on the band perceptively quite a good deal longer than a lot of people, because what was happening with it was completely random, but what was happening was that when somebody would take a huge dive on the dipole, they'd be a massive signal on the vertical because the angle of incidence at that time of day was just beginning to change, and it would swing forth and back. And you hear people wrap it up, well, you've just dropped out, so I'll wrap it up with you, I'll say 73, and I'd still be going. And then I was combining the two. So when the dipole was listening really good, I had a great signal. And when the dipole took a dive, the vertical was listening great, and I was able to sustain a major signal. And if the person on the far side could still hear me, well, we just kept on talking. And that was amazing. So bands that have quick changes like 40, I really noticed it there, Steve.
Yeah. Kind of like you're surfing the gray line. You're on the freaking surfboard, right? And you're teetering right on the edge of that wave, and that thing's rolling, man. She's going, and you're going with it. You got no choice, right? But there's certain things you can do to, like you said, extend your operating time a little bit. And that's where, like, we've all heard the phrase where, and I do believe this, two things. One-way propagation, weird. Don't ask me. I can't explain it. I hear people talk about it. I don't know whether I believe it or not, but we've all seen some weird stuff happen where a station on the receiving end of your signal will be like, well, you're like, K1GMM, you're 20 over. And I've got him coming at me on substantially more power on a better antenna. And the best I can give him is like a 5/9. And it doesn't make any sense to me. Now, I know that these your antennas hear well. You know that, right? I mean, we all know our antenna systems. If you spend any time playing with these things and spend enough time on the air, you know how your antennas hear, you know how they transmit. Some have better teeth than others and better ears than others. And, their lobes are all different and they may transmit better to a certain area. But that's the other question I had. Let me jump gears quick. Maybe you can answer this for me. I've noticed when I'm playing, let me get back over to that screen so you know exactly what I'm talking about. And this works in Uno and OpenHP SDR. The same, I see the exact same thing. So when you move this, right, and you watch the gain right here change. Now, quite often, you were mentioning like when I first started doing this, I tended to look for the visual aspect of it. And in other words, I tended to watch the pan adapter too much. So what I ended up doing now is I actually listen. And I don't tend to watch the pan adapter too much, because what I found on this is you think that in theory, the noise, as you drop the gain from wide, this is wide open right here, right? Everybody, just so you understand what this represents. You're basically, your antenna's wide open, your receive's wide open right here. Your gain is like, look at, your gain is 0.967. That's pretty much cranked right up, right? So there's full gain. So you think, well, you know, you reduce the noise by coming, you really want to reduce the gain, but sometimes I found it doesn't work like that. Like if I listen and I start sweeping and I'm listening for that noise, and of course I come in here, yes, sometimes it'll get quieter and you'll see the pan adapter actually fall. You'll see the noise floor drop. And keep in mind, other mileage may vary. Now, the receive antenna I'm using is a very hot antenna for diversity, I think. I think it's pretty brutal. So my question is, why is it that oftentimes you'll see a situation where the noise will completely disappear with a huge amount of gain on this bullseye? Like, I'll sweep it and the noise will get worse. I'll find the null, right? I'll be sweeping around. All of a sudden I'll go, oh, there's a null. And it goes quiet. And then I'll take it and I'll start dragging it in and reducing the gain. And all of a sudden the pan adapter drops, but the noise actually reappears and it gets really loud.
You know what I think might be happening there, Steve? I think you might be coming across onto a new noise, which is a broadband noise. So you find a local noise and maybe it's a spur type of noise, and you take out the gain and you sweep around and you find where you're going and you zap it and you get rid of it. And then, as you say, you start moving around again, and all of a sudden the noise floor on the whole pan adapter drops, but the noise is back. So I think maybe you've come into phase on a new noise which has just been sitting on your noise floor, but it's a wideband noise. Maybe that's all I can maybe contribute on that one. You might be changing phase to a degree where it's finding a broadband noise as opposed to one that you initially targeted in on. Would that be plausible to you?
That actually makes some sense, because now that I think about it, the noise, I'm going to have to pay attention now that you said that. I have a couple different types of noises here, and they're not there all the time. And this happens multiple times a week. I'll be running it like right where I have it right now, and it's pretty much cranked open, but the noise, the interference I'm hearing is gone. Of course, the receive is like really cranked up, so now I just roll the AGC back and quiet it down and everything snapped into shape. But if I bring that in, the actual noise itself, so now that I think about it, sounds different. It's almost like bacon sizzling in a pan. It's different. I'm gonna have to check that out. Another question. All right, QRN, QRM. What have you found regarding atmospheric noise? I found that sometimes this can be amazingly effective on static crashing. It depends on the strength of the signal, but I've reduced static crashes by like 20 to 30 dB on this thing, on using this type of system. It's pretty freaking incredible. Of course, there's going to be a lot of attenuation when you do it. I found I get quite a bit of attenuation, but on a 20 over signal, it doesn't matter. I mean, go ahead.
Yeah, no, you're good. Yeah, I would agree with you there. On the likes of static crashes, yeah, you can attenuate and you can clear up, you can take out a lot of the impact of them. But yeah, I think you need a strong signal, exactly like what you were saying. You need a strong signal as somebody who's going to hold in there with a really consistently strong signal to not impact them. I think you're more using it as a broadband attenuator of some type than you're actually, because can you imagine what is the possibility or what is the chance of being sitting at the correct phase of a static crash every time they
there you go. Perfect explanation. Yeah, makes
But
sense.
but but you can configure the way you're listening by using this to minimize its impact. And
Right.
by doing that, what you will drastically do is you will increase the signal to noise ratio, which is what this game is all about.
That's
You
another
got
comment I had another question.
you got signal to noise ratio. You got the royal flush.
Yep. That's what you want. That's the ultimate goal. I did a big thing on this. I don't know, gosh, it must have been a year ago or more. Signal to noise ratio and how important. Most people don't even consider this. This is actually what diversity is really all about. Is
Yeah.
improving you want the maximum amount of signal for the lowest amount of noise. You want to take that noise and kick the bottom out from underneath it. And that way, if you have, and we've all talked about this, right? How many times have we talked to somebody and we've been like a 5/9 to them, and they're like, well, we're having a hard time hearing you because I got an S9 noise floor.
Mm-hmm.
On 80 meters especially, sometimes 40. 40 meters is a great band, but I can't tell you how many people I run into with ungodly noise floors. I'm like, how can you live with that? They can fix that. They can, like what you're talking about, this is the fix for that. Hope is not lost,
Absolutely not. Well, I think the important thing about maybe the way we did the presentation tonight, and I hope people enjoyed it. I hope they got a bit of a kick out of it, even if it was something that you're never going to do or you don't need to do. Maybe it was, ever so slightly interesting. You gotta have a little bit of a nosy around my shack or something, at least. But all joking aside, I think the thing about it is that whether you need it or not, the fact that it is there and it is available and it can be done in the software on many different types of radio, running different platforms, or you can do it, as I say, in the old school manner, which is using the phase noise cancellation units. And I've met people that said, and I even know a guy, he doesn't live too far away from me. I know, I tried that. I've been down that route. I put up 3 different aerials. I couldn't get that to work, blah, blah, blah. No, that's nonsense. No, it's not nonsense. It is the most, when you crack this,
Mm-hmm.
the satisfaction of getting your bit of spectrum and your band back and that beautiful espresso coffee machine hiss on HF and nothing else is just, it's beautiful. It's rewarding. It's like a mini project within a mini project within just keeping your station on the air. I'll be honest with you, Steve, I do a lot of listening because I work as an artist. I got out of the broadcasting industry a long time ago. I paint. That's what I do for a living. I paint oils and watercolors. So predominantly landscape work. No plug. We'll continue on straight away. But
Which brain is that? Left brain, right brain? Which is that?
I can't remember. The man of no brain. But anyway, look, I've actually got my easel and my work desks and my stuff out of shot here. This is my radio shack is in my workspace, in my art studio. So I often come in and I might throw on a conversation on the 20-meter band, listening to a couple of people ragging, or I might throw on a broadcast station, some utility stuff, and I just listen. I love to listen. And when I paint, as opposed to listening to music when I paint, I listen to my radios. And that was kind of taken away from me when this noise came. So I had to do something about it. And it's just so rewarding to be able to come back into your shack and think about it as well, Steve. And I've sort of said this to people, and people just take it so for granted that they kind of almost forget it. So you want to become a radio amateur. So you got to study, you got to take some exams, you got to get some experience, maybe have an Elmer. You got to pay for your ticket, your hard-earned bucks, as you guys would call them. You got to get a radio. You got to spend some time. You got to get creative, build some aerials, get yourself on the air. Man, how pissed are you when you turn it on and all you hear is... You got to do something about it then. And 9 times out of 10, the only person that can really do that for you is a really good ham buddy or yourself. Mm-hmm. And when you do it yourself, it's super rewarding. It's brilliant. And you get back what you deserve and what you put so much of your love and your passion and your energy into getting your ticket, your call sign, and you can get on the air and you can actually hear people. And that's what this game's about, listening.
That is so well said. So well said. Quick question. See, all this stuff is starting to come back to me. Is there such a thing as a receive antenna, a diversity antenna that's too hot on receive? And I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. I think that end fed I'm running out there, which it's got just a single wire to a ground rod. That's all it is. I don't use it for, I have transmitted on it. It actually works. But that's just my receive diversity antenna, second receive antenna. I swear to God that thing was better as a quarter wave, 80 meter vertical. Originally, I had it up as a quarter wave, went straight up into the top of a tree, and then I switched it via relay into a 49-1 for turning it into a half wave on 40 and up. I swear that antenna, the receive on it now is freaking cracking. It wasn't like that before, but it just seems like the diversity doesn't work as well. Is that possible?
Are you using that one as the receiver 2 antenna, as the noise sensing and
Yes.
receiver 2?
Yes.
How much? So what is the strength of the noise on the what we were calling the everyday antenna?
Sometimes barely noticeable.
You could try swap it around, Steve, in the phasing window. You could swap around the receiver 1 and the receiver 2 reference source, so you could actually subtract the transmit receive antenna.
I've done that. Yes, I've done that. I was gonna.
How did that work out for you?
Okay, I can't believe you said that, because that's something else. I should look at my notes. I wrote that down. So in the let me get over here. So in the reference source, believe it or not, there is some noise that I get. If I put receiver 1 on, I can freaking wipe that out, because the second receive antenna is so freaking hot. If I got a signal coming in at 30 to 40 over, let's say on 80 meters, let's say it's 35 over on the loop. It's going to be 30 over on that freaking vertical. Mm-hmm. I mean, it's terminated at 100 feet in a tree. It's up there. So it hears good, Sometimes I do that. I put it on receiver 1, and holy crap, that's even better than using the freaking receive antenna. And that's something I see. I don't get that. I don't understand that. So maybe you could explain that to me. That's the truth. Swear to God.
I got to hold my hands up here with you, dude. I don't know if I can explain that one. I really don't. And it's like, as you say, it's mileage may vary. and what's going on there is something I've not experienced. I was in a position where the noise source, when I swung my beams around into the west, when I was pointing North America, when I was pointing Central America, South America to a degree, literally from northwest through to south was really when I was having my big issues with noise, because I was pointing right across the house where that was coming from. So I went to the very edge of my property, as close to the noise source as I could. So my tower is about 170 feet away from the noise source, but I was able to get about, say, 65 feet right up against the noise. I put a little vertical aerial right in the corner of my property, as close to theirs as possible, to try and nail this noise. And that way I was able to get a good signal off it. And I was listening to nothing else. I wasn't picking up any other signals, none of the wanted signal. I was only picking up the noise. And I think that could be one of the key factors. So my little vertical aerial was getting hammered out of it because it was only 65 feet away from the noise source. It was getting hammered by this. And it was like a quarter wave ground plane for 20 meters, listening on 20, 65 feet away. And the beam was another 100 feet back. And I was feeding those two sources then into the software. But the little quarter wave wasn't picking up the DX. It just wasn't capable of it. It's a quarter wave is just a glorified half wave with a few extra legs at an angle.
It's a
There's no real
dummy load with some ground
gain.
radials.
Yeah, nothing going on. But it was ideal for what I needed. So it wasn't picking up the wanted signal. It was getting the noise beautifully. And I was able to just get that clean, no residue vibe going. And just then all I was receiving then was what was coming in off the antenna, the main antenna on the tower. So maybe what you're doing, maybe it is too hot and it's receiving too much of the wanted signal as well.
I think you're right on the money. I think you nailed it. See, this is important for people watching this that are going to try this, because the antennas, this was a big thing I was going to ask you about. Recommended antennas, starting points. What would be a good starting point? Let's say, hypothetically, you've got a bare bone station. Many people don't run beams, even on the upper frequencies. They're stuck. They have to run a G5RV or an off-center fed or anything. God help them if they're running an off-center fed. But talk about a noise monster. I ran one for about an hour, and that thing was gone. That thing was gone. Oh my God. It loaded up great, and it probably worked great, but I was like, holy crap. I ran out and I released the paracord and down it came, and it never came back out again. It never went up again. But I think you nailed it, because I had exponentially more noise when I had it configured as a half wave on 40 and up. Most of my noise is, believe it or not, on 20 and 80. 40, for some reason, is not affected, really. I don't need diversity or anything on 40, but 80, see, that was functioning as a quarter wave vertical on 80. And that thing was freaking gangbusters as far as from a diversity aspect. The signal was horrible. I remember it couldn't hear anything compared to what the loop hears. So that's probably the key, right?
Well, can I just...
What do you think?
Yeah, just to interject, and you sort of, as you'd say yourself, you brought back a couple of memories for me, because I ran a quarter wave vertical with about 25 elevated radials on 80 for a while. And I remember thinking, hey, this thing is horrendously noisy. Like, man, it was a great transmitting antenna. I'd just say boo to a goose. But I had to kind of flip over to something far more conservative to actually hear people, because this thing was just like listening to a power station, you know.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just, and again, and as I said, I'm out in the sticks here. It should be fairly clean, but boy, it was just so noisy. It was really hard to pull people out of what was going on. But what I'm trying to say is that, you see, as we progress down the band, naturally those bands get noisier. You get to top band, you get to 160. You know, even at a quiet location, just the inherent characteristics and the persona of the low bands are far more noisy. So 80 inclusive, you tend to hear more pops, whistles, cracks, bangs, things like that, all that stuff. The signal to noise ratios on the lower bands is far less than it is on the higher bands. You can go up on 10 meters, you can have maybe a noise floor of an S2 or an S3, and somebody can come whopping in running about like 20 watts out of a half wave dipole if the band is wide open, and there'll be like 10/9. Look at that for a signal to noise ratio. You can have somebody that's 10/9 on 80, but your noise floor on 80 might only be, well, you know, it might only be maybe a 3 or a 5 or maybe a 7, but the atmospherics and the blips and the noise, and there's always, you ever see your needle on 40 meters and your needle on 80 and your needle on top band is always far more active and busy on the low band. So they're just more, so the signal to noise ratio and getting rid of a noise with phase noise cancellation is going to be a far more subtle job. It's not going to be as noticeable as it would be on 20 and up. You know, once you get to 20 meters, you're kind of in the middle of the HF spectrum. You're not at 0 megs and you're not at 30 megs. You're kind of ballpark middle. So once you get to sort of 20 and higher, we really start getting a substantially better signal to noise ratio. So if you got a noise and you cancel it, you're really going to see the difference. Whereas if you got a noise on 40, 80 or top band and you cancel it, what you're left with, even pure natural atmospherics on a perfectly clean band, is going to be far more than what you see normally. Now, one other thing that you just kind of sparked an idea about there as well is it also depends on the kind of radio that you're using, because noise floors and S meters are very perceptive things.
Mhm.
Some radios use a linear S meter, which means that every single S unit from 0 to 9 plus is 6 dB. Whereas some manufacturers, their S meters are non-linear. The likes of ICOM, some of the ACEs and the Kenwoods, their S meters not, so they might use value of say 6 dB to go from S7 to S8 and 6 dB to go from S8 to S9. But when they get down into the smaller numbers, to give you a perceived quiet band and a quiet listen and make it easy on you and stop fatiguing you, and to give claims that their receiver is super clean and you're not picking up a load of noise, they might say, well, you know, to get from an S2 to an S3 is going to be 12 dB. To get from an S3 to an S4 is going to be 12 dB, and then we'll go to 6 dB per up to an S9. So at the end of the day, a lot of it is relative, but it all harks back to something that you said, and you just hit the sweet spot there really nicely when you said that you were using the diversity by ear. You used to watch the pan adapter, now you don't. You do it by ear.
Mhm.
So I think you hit the nail on the head when you said, I do it by ear, because yeah, you're naturally looking for the best signal to noise ratio,
Mhm.
Steve.
Yes, and that's what I was being. It causes. Well, you know me, how easily I'm confused. I mean, this stuff can get really confusing, you know. But you know, I just started listening one day. This is a listening sport, folks. I hate to break the news to you, but you gotta hear. You gotta shut your pie hole and open your ears. I can say that because I'm guilty, but you know, when you listen, you can really hear what's going on. You'll hear the null. When you say null, see, most people think, okay, null, perceptibly to your ears, the volume is going to drop. That's not how it works. A null is a null in the noise. In other words, you'll hear that noise, and then all of a sudden, boom, you'll hear it disappear, and it'll go to a fine white hiss. It'll still be just as loud. The hiss can be as loud, but the noise is gone. You know, but at the same time, you may see a radical reduction in S units, but perceptibly, it's epic. It is freaking epic. When you get this nailed down, it is. It's a game changer for sure. Geez, let me make sure. Was there anything else before I ask anything else? Was there anything else you were going for here? Because we didn't get to all your slides.
No, I think honestly, I think we're really good. I'd be happy that we've sort of covered it without going into. I would hate to go into a situation where it just gets too complicated. I think, you know, we've done a nice kind of a balance. I'm happy that we've covered the fact that it can be done. Let me just maybe just recap some really simple stuff. One of the main things where people fall down is the fact that their noise sense antenna is not going to pick up the noise as well as their main antenna, so they haven't got that much ability to cancel. If you're only picking up the noise at an S3 or an S4 on your noise sensing antenna, and yet it's rocking in on your main aerial, your main antenna at an S8 or an S9, you're going to end up with about 4 units of noise left over. Really, if you're going to do this, try and get the noise sensing antenna to listen as good as possible to, you know,
to the noise.
Something decent to subtract off what's annoying you. You know, you need,
Okay.
you know,
Yep.
if you've got 5 apples in one bag, you want to get rid of them all, subtract another 5 apples out of the equation. It's a simple algorithm, you know. So you have a one cycle. Look, there's one cycle. So there's your line. There's a one cycle. Okay. So by doing phase noise cancellation, you're just bringing a second identical cycle in there, and all we're doing is we're just moving them out of phase so it cancels out the noise.
Right.
So if your second cycle, the noise one is much smaller, you'll only cancel out a certain amount, you'll have a little bit left over. So if you're going to do it, do it right. Go and get an aerial, build an aerial. Now, we were talking about aerials, and I think that's something you wanted to hit on because, again, not everybody just has the space and the people can't do it. But that's what I was trying to stress at the beginning of this, was that, as I say, it'll never be an antenna that you will transmit through unless you have a lot of, if you're doing this out of necessity, you are building an aerial just to pick up the noise. I would have never dreamt of transmitting through the little 20-meter quarter wave that I built and shoved in the corner of the property. Never. It was put together with glue, string, and washing up liquid bottles. It was like something out of Star Wars, or the Land the Time Forgot. It was just a little quarter wave. It never took any RF. It was only, its job was just to sit there and listen to the noise, and that's what it did all day, and it did it beautifully. So you could shove it in a tree, you could hang it out of a ditch, you can tack it along the back fence of your property, as long as it can pick up the noise. Run it under your gutter, under the eave of your house, in the gable of the eave, across the back of your garage. As long as it's picking up the noise, you're in a win-win situation, because then you got something to cancel out against. You've got to have something to cancel out against.
Right.
But as I say, if you've got an end-fed wire or an off-center fed, and that's your mainstay antenna, and you really can't put up another one of those, what I'm saying is you don't need to. You just don't need to. You just need to pick up the noise. You don't need to pick up your buddy down in Texas.
Right.
That's one of the things. And the other thing is that it does just take a little bit of time to get used to it. And I think, without blowing my own trumpet, I think my little analogy of using an ATU to match an antenna, I think that's quite a good analogy. Mm-hmm. Because, your first time with an ATU, you're a bit clumsy, you're a bit clunky, and I'll never
not sure which one to do first. Do I roll the inductor, or do I work on the capacitance on the transmitter or the antenna? Yeah. And it's like, what the frick? I got a bunch of knobs here. What am I doing?
But then it just becomes second nature, and you do it without thinking. And you'll be the exact same if you do it legacy-wise with one of these little units. You'll just come into your shack and you go bang, and you're good to go. But you will have to adjust as you move around. Your frequency agility as you move from band to band, you'll have to adjust. But you may not have the noise on every band, Steve.
No, and the other thing I've noticed, this just happened, when was it? This morning. The wife turned on the coffee maker, and she shut it off. And like I said, when I first lit up if I go to the pan adapter right here, I can show you. It's the radio's off right now. But see this little nurb right here, this little bump, and see this little bump right here? Now, I was fussing with that while you were talking. Before I killed it, this was up here. That's a noise source. Mm-hmm. This is a noise source right here. It is a signal, but this is actually a noise source right here. This is a noise source. Weird, right? This is a noise source. And I can go in and I can pretty much wipe those out. However, it changes. It's changing. All of a sudden, I'll be sitting here listening. I'll be in a QSO with someone, and I'll hear, it'll just start coming in again. I'm like, what the frick? I just nulled it out. And it's like, I don't know what's happening, but something's shifting. And I'll just grab the little bullseye, and I'll give it a little tweak here or there. And and usually it's it's always the phase. That's the kicker. If that ever happens to somebody, just grab it and just move the phase. Try to keep it in the same spot or lock the gain or whatever. If it's moving around on you, usually you can just shift the phase by, 40 degrees, I've noticed, and boom, it'll disappear again. And sometimes it'll come. It's weird. I don't know why that happens, what it is, but it happens here. There's a few little areas of carnage that I see every once in a while, but it's not there all the time. And it's probably, like you said, it's somebody in the neighborhood. I know I got a friggin' dope dealer who lives across the street, he's a big pothead, and he's probably got grow lights and all kinds of stuff going over there. You know, that's quite the crew. They're about 2 football fields away, which is close enough. Doesn't have to be like your next door neighbor. It could be like, well, I got a friend that complained that he lived I don't know how many blocks from like one of those marts. Those, it's not a supermarket, but it's like a convenience store. In the minute sunset would come, those halogen lights would kick on. And it was a total freaking wipeout at his house on HF. He'd know right away when those things would light up at night. Horrible. And it was a long ways away. You know, it doesn't have to be close.
Well, as long as he's able to pick them up with a decent signal on a noise sensing antenna, he's got something to wind up against it, and he can cancel it out. The distance, and the beauty of that is as well, is that it was one source. It was just coming from the one place. It was one set of lights, one dirty signal being generated. And sometimes what I was finding, it was kind of ironic in that I had one source nearby, but it was such a wide band natured interference, Steve. It was really quite noticeable on 40. And I think because of the band characteristics, which we were just talking about on the likes of 80 and top band, it wasn't so discernible. And it really just was storming right the way from 20 through to 6 meters. For some reason, it wasn't particularly heavy duty on 15 meters. I have no idea why. There's maybe just some kind of a notch in the unit there where it wasn't generating a lot of noise in that particular band. But what I did find ironic was that one source, so wide band, it was literally sitting in about 15 to 20 megs of spectrum.
Wow.
It was obliterating broadcast, aeronautical, marine, utility, everything and anything, and obviously the amateur bands as well. So there was no respite to it once it came on, because it was a set of lights. Once they came on in the evening, that was it. They were on. And as I say, I was just fortunate that it was one source. So if you have multiples, you'll have to kind of cherry pick, maybe would be the recommendation. The most offending ones are the ones that are sitting on your favorite bands or that are in the way, and nail those bad boys. And hopefully, as you move around through the bands, you'll find that they're not necessarily prevalent everywhere,
Yeah. Yeah. You've got to pick your battles, don't you?
Yeah.
Because
exactly.
What came to mind right now is when you listen, like I said before, all you have to do is listen on HF. You don't have to be an operator. You could be an SWLer or anything like that. Just a listener. And you'll hear guys say, good Lord, my noise floor is freaking through the roof. Guys, I listen every day. I hear them say that. And, I lost my train of thought. What the heck was I going to say? I've got a couple things rolling through my skull. Okay, I'm going to just... Okay, I just got derailed, and how embarrassing. And it happens all the time. You guys are used to this. Okay, so I'm going to shift gears really quick, and then we're going to probably pull a plug here, unless you got a lot more, Roly. How much more you got?
No, I'm good.
You're good?
No,
okay.
If I go on any further, we're only going into the valley of bad taste.
Yep. There you go. Yeah, I was going to say something just now, and I'm going to refrain from saying that because that puts us in that domain, and I really don't want to go. I don't know how many kids are listening and who's got. A lot of people run this on their TV in their living room. Yeah. Yeah. Do you do that too?
Sometimes, yeah, we could be, guilty as charged. Not always, but yeah, we do. We do. It's great. It's cool.
The dilemma. So here's my dilemma, and that is, I really love the fact that I can have 2 different antennas. Excuse me, my primary TX antenna and that abomination that's out back that hears so well on 80 and 20. Yeah, it's okay. It's not bad on 40, but it's not comparable to loops. You can't compare it to those. But what do I do? I'm actually debating on, I got to put this question to you. What would you do? I love the fact that I can use two antennas simultaneously to receive when the band is quiet, and I don't need diversity. I love it. It's freaking cracking. It is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. But a better antenna is what you were referring to. Something that doesn't see the antenna. Basically, you cut that. Yeah, I think it was 60. I think it went up 66, 67 feet. I think I didn't even cut it to resonance. I figured, what the hell? I'll just throw it up there. And it was just a vertical, went straight up into a tree and just grounded it. And that was it. That's all I did with it. And that thing worked really good on diversity, running diversity. The receive was horrible on it as far as signal strength. So what would you do? Would you throw another wire in the freaking tree out there and just run have your diversity receive antenna? I got my second receive antenna and run it off a coax switch. Whenever I want to run diversity, just boom, hit the freaking switch and it flips over to the diversity antenna. You see where I'm going? Because that's how much I love it. And I don't know if I can live without it. That's the problem.
Well, can I just put something to you on a more, okay, as you say, you don't have a huge, big noise issue going down.
No, it's not.
You like to be able to run a little bit of diversity, and to hark back to kind of where I started all this at was, when you want a noise antenna, it doesn't have to be anything glamorous, nothing too shabby, but absolutely nothing glamorous. You're never going to transmit through it. It's just got to be able to pick up some of the offending noise sources. So this hobby is all about having fun. Okay, many other things, but it really, at the end of the day, you got to be able to come into your shack and have some fun. Do not obliterate that beautiful aerial that you love so much under no circumstances. None whatsoever. Go out in the yard and just put something together that can pick up a few noises. And coax switch across left and right, because I think if you do, you'll be at a loss and you'll regret it. So, wow, I've got a lovely clean band. My spectrum is amazing. My diversity is working beautifully. But you know what? I didn't miss that antenna. No, keep your antenna. You gotta have something to come into the shack for, get a kick out of. You love multi-RXing, and keep doing it. Or even just change it up, mix it up for a while. Maybe do without it for the summer and just see how you go. And if you really miss it that bad, throw it back up again in the autumn before the winter comes in and you're back in business.
Yeah, I may do that. And just, that makes sense. I can leave the lines right in the tree. Just tie them off at the bottom, drop it down and disconnect it. And I can coil it up and hang it in the garage, and put it back out there. So, yeah, it's a good idea. It's me, dude.
You're spoiled for choice.
I have some kind of mental problem. It's some kind of mental issue. I do. I admit it. The first step in, recovery is admitting you have a problem. And I am a member of Ham Radio Anonymous. I don't care what anybody says. I'm the freaking founder, damn it. I founded Ham Radio Anonymous. I got a problem, but I can't figure out if I can live without that or not. So we'll have to make a decision on that. It is quite startling. I know I've showed the guys a while ago when I flipped it on and off, and it's like, wow. So I think you're right. Shoot, man, I could probably take a piece of wire and just run it through the freaking bushes out there. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Who cares? As long as it's picking up the noise, right? Who cares?
But again, you've hit the nail on the head. That is exactly it. It doesn't have to be anything special. If you can pick up the noise, a piece of wire with a coat hanger, with a 9-inch nail, with a washing line,
It's so true, man. Yeah.
Then that is the whole thing. That goes back to that first slide we showed. You pick up the noise, you got something to cancel out against. You can't pick up the noise, you don't. So, overkill, I'd save the overkill for when you're on the air and you're really having fun.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. Put the overkill into your transmitting antenna. Really. I mean, if you're going to do something, do it that way. Really. You know what I mean? Doesn't that make the most sense? But that's not me, because I'm easily distracted and I have a mental issue. So we'll if you got nothing else, man, I'm going to go ahead and rip the plug out of the wall. And I think this was very cool. And I think people are going to, I know I would have, when I started looking at this diversity crap, I was trying to do some research, and I'm telling you, I couldn't find hardly anything except for demonstrations. I'm like, oh yeah, that's pretty cool, you know, but nobody really talking about, especially for an individual like me that wants to do the best job with a piece of wire. And the realization for me is you don't need a Kraken antenna for the diversity receive antenna.
No.
You don't. You can, like you just said, and that defies logic for a lot of people because they don't understand how it all works.
I'm like a broken record. I really am. You know, the needle just goes.
It's just this constant skip. It skips back.
Just pick up the noise as best you can. You're only after the wanted signal. You're not going to try and talk to the noise. The noise is not going to QSL with you. You're not going to DXCC the noise. It's not going to be on QRZ noise like November Oscar India Sierra Echo 1. No, it's not going to be there. All you want to do is pick it up and cancel it out. So nothing elaborate, and that's the beauty of it. And can I just add in just a few little kind of things?
Sure.
You know, so when you do actually build something, you know, and build something, when you unravel some wire and put it in the ditch,
that's about it.
And you terminate it off. But when you can actually reduce that noise, say you've got a little bit of this residue left over. So say you were only able to pick up the noise at an S5, but your noise floor is an S7. So you're going to have a couple of dBs, you know, a couple of S units left over, maybe about kind of 2 S units left over, what their ballpark. But then you get to play with your AGC or your RF gain, or even better still, then you can engage your noise blanker, or you can reduce the amount of noise. You know that noise blanker on the 7300, the way kind of 3 different layers. You can do the depth, the width, the this, and and so you can reduce those, and you can run the minimum amount of noise blanking, but you'll be able to kind of really, you'll be able to polish it. So even if you're sitting back and you're watching us tonight going, oh, I'll never be able to get up a noise sensing antenna that'll get an S9. Okay, well, maybe go for an S7 or an S6 or an S5 and just polish that a little bit. You kind of get the end result, because any improvement in this game is going to make it more enjoyable to sit in front of the radio. And at the end,
that's the key.
That's what we do. We sit on our backsides in front of our radios.
That's the key. You just said it. First of all, if it's not fun, you need to go find something else to do. You'll hear me say that all the time. The minute it stops being fun, go do something else, because you shouldn't be in it. It's a hobby, okay? Mm-hmm. It's a hobby. Treat it like a hobby. If you ain't having fun, freaking go do something else, man. There's plenty of things to do out there. And there's such a thing as keep it simple, you know? Yeah. This is not, I think this is so big that it shows me, and probably many others, it's not rocket science, man. And you don't have to go crazy. As long as you have the noise in there and you get a piece of wire. I mean, my God, you could take a piece of wire and run it around your back door, for crying out loud. Mm-hmm. Seriously.
Yeah.
Run it up the freaking corner of your wall. I mean, anywhere it's going to pick up the noise. How expensive is wire? My God, you can buy a 500-foot spool for like $50. You can get a lot of antenna work out of a 500-foot spool of wire. You know what I'm saying? A lot. So this isn't, you know, it doesn't have to be a rich man's sport. It's really cool.
It's as rewarding to get rid of your noise. Well, for me anyway, because I had such an ongoing problem, and because I was so spoiled for so long living in a rural location with a really quiet noise floor. But it's as rewarding as making your first DX contact. It's as rewarding as building your own antenna and getting great results out of it. It's as rewarding as getting your first really cool QSL card from somewhere pretty special to be able to put something together. We've shown you how to do the connections. They're pretty simple. It's easy stuff, not too hard. Follow it through, and a little bit of time, a little bit of effort, and you can get the most amazing result. And when you sit down in front of your radio, you really will. You go, wow, that Egypt in Ireland, man, he was right. My radio sounds beautiful and I love it. And all of a sudden you'll be listening to stuff that was dug down in the dirt for the last 6 months that's really been freaking you out.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'll actually, like you said, you'll actually enjoy being at the radio. It becomes enjoyment then. And that's, you've heard, and I am going to tie it off here. So this is my last soapbox, but you've heard me talk about the benefits of what I call true SDR technology. The 7300 is nothing but a glorified superhead. I don't care what anybody says. Yeah, it's an SDR radio, but no. Is it a non-flex expert? No. It is. What these other things do is not what the 7300 can do. You can make you can throw stuff on it like I do to kind of bring it into the non-flex realm. On the front end only, but not the TX side. But anyways, I digress. But it's all about anything that makes the experience more enjoyable. That's the way I roll. There is nothing that can compare to having a noise issue, a high noise floor, and being able to almost snap your fingers and have that go away. And then you have the power of these SDR platforms where you can maybe use a little bit of noise reduction, take the AGC gain, roll that thing down, and you're talking, someone drops the key, man, it's like they're sitting right here in the room with you, and you can hear the hair fall off your head. I mean, that's how quiet it is. It is mind-bending what you can do with this stuff. And that, to me, that's all about the experience. That's pure enjoyment. That's amazing. You know what I mean? But I know it's not for everybody. I remember, and I'll end it with this. I was talking to someone, and they said, "Oh yeah, well, I was talking to some guy, or I showed him this or something, and he was in his shack, and he had some kind of SDR rig there, and this guy came over, and he was showing him something to do with it, and in the receive was like you could hear freaking pin drop in a padded room on a carpeted floor. That's how, I'm not kidding. That's what it's like. It's insane. And he's like, oh my God. And this is an old school ham, man. He'd been in the hobby like 40 years, and he's like, I could never deal with that. I need to hear some element of noise, hiss. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, if you want to listen to that, be my guest, but I will never go back down that road ever. Once you go there, it will mess you up. I guarantee it'll jack you up. Final thoughts there. Roly, go ahead.
All right. Okay. Well, I would concur and I would agree and reinforce everything you said. And I think it's a funny kind of a hobby because people find themselves, some people kind of are almost in the born to be a ham category. Other people just are completely accidental hams. And some people get into ham radio and they just find themselves interested in particular facets of the hobby. So if you're interested in the HF spectrum and this particular facet of the hobby and the noise is the issue, I would hate for you to feel that you had to migrate to VHF or UHF or, oh, I only, I only work satellites now, or I only do FT8 because I have a big noise floor, or I only, I work on the key all the time because my noise level, the CW comes in beautiful, but the noise level is so bad I can't work phone. Don't let the noise push you around. Don't let it bully you into doing a certain part of the hobby. We're so fortunate that the hobby has so many different facets and aspects, but don't be shoved out of doing something that you really want to do because of noise. Take the bull by the horns And we've kind of tried to show you how, or even get you on that starting path, or give you a little bit of encouragement to show you that it can be done and how to go about it. And take it by the horns. And if this is the bit of the hobby that you get a kick out of, well, then go for it. And it's like Steve says, and I do equate it to, that beautiful, creamy kind of hiss you get on them. And
yeah,
I'd nearly forgotten what that was like, Steve.
wow.
I had it for years. I could listen, I could watch the needle not even move on the radio and hear people at about a readability 4 to 5 as the bands were kind of opening and closing. And all of a sudden that was just taken away. And to get that back, one final thing that I have to say, this is crazy. And how did I forget to say this? If you build a decent noise antenna and you do that we were talking about, and you cancel it out, you get an S9 on your noise S9 here, you cancel it out and you do the gig, it doesn't affect the receive strength of the original wanted signal. So if I was talking to Steve and Steve was rocking in at 10/9, okay? So Steve's rocking in 10/9, I've got a noise floor of a 9. So he's in the clear, but only by about 10 dB. If I do and we get rid of all the noise, so we've got a massive signal to noise ratio, Steve is still going to be 10/9. It's not like using an attenuator to try and push the noise back. It's not like using the RF gain. You're not cheating. You're actually removing the noise from the equation. And Steve is going to be there with a 10/9. And when he closes the mic, the needle is going to go down to nothing. Yeah. And that's the beauty of this. It's not like using attenuators. Right. And Steve is not going to sound like Donald Duck or Mickey Mouse because we've got a DSP unit and we've washed him to freaking hell to get rid of some noise.
That freaking watery sound, like
Steve
you're underwater.
Like he always sounds. He's going to sound great, and he's going to be 10/9.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. It's been my pleasure. It's been really nice to be with you tonight. It's local time is 10 to 11 here in the southeast of Ireland.
Wow.
It's been a really cool Saturday night to be on the air with K1GMM, the Green Mountain Maniac, the one and only. And hey, all the best. Thank you. And if we've helped anybody, brilliant. If we haven't, I'll be doing confessions at 12:30 tomorrow morning. Okay.
Sounds good, Roly. Thanks so much, man. And I can't even thank you enough. I think this was the best, one of the most informative things, even speaking for myself. I appreciate the time, your time for sure. It's like freaking gold. And it's my hope that people will stumble upon this and it will at least get people thinking. And if not, just thinking that there is hope, there's ways around this. There's ways to rectify the situation, and that I think this is something that needed to be put forward, and it needed to be public, in the public realm. I will tag it, and go ahead.
I just jump in there. Sorry for cutting across you.
That's okay.
The final thing, what you're saying is so relevant about putting this out there. It's more relevant than people believe, really, because you talk to any of the really older hams that have seen a couple of different cycles, and they will tell you the noise floor is only going one way.
Yep.
That's up.
I've heard that.
It's not going to come down. There's nothing going to change. Nothing is going to. There's going to be more technology. There's going to be more cheap imports. There's going to be more electrical devices. They're going to start using more RF. They're going to start taking our spectrum from it, everything. And it's getting, the way, and it's a great analogy. And I believe every word out of these guys' mouths. And you meet an old ham, and I have the greatest respect for them. And you meet a guy and he's 85 or he's 90 and he's on the air and he's really sprightly, and you're telling him, hey, I'm running 400 watts. Got 3 elements here and da-da-da. And he'd go, yeah, sure, I worked the world on 100 watts and a half-wave dipole. Of course he did. Yes, he did. But the reason that he did was because he was a great operator, but because 40 years ago, he didn't have the noise floor we guys have today.
Yeah.
They were able to do it. Now, you still can do that. Yeah, you can do it. But it's far tougher now because you're fighting such a big noise floor. I hear guys on 80 meters. I listen to the boys in Ireland and the boys in the UK, the G guys, the old G nets. And you always hear them saying that the noise is only going one way. So, yeah, I'll pass it back to you. And just to reinforce your statement that this is, it's important to bring this out there because it's only going up that noise floor.
100% agreed. Anybody who thinks that's not true is got their head seriously in a hole. It is bad. And anybody who listens to HF, regardless of whether you're operating HF or not, you count. Go ahead and take a piece of paper and count the number of guys that you hear that are struggling because their noise floors are so high. It's an epidemic. It's an RF epidemic, literally, and it isn't going away. It's like Roly said, it's only going to get worse. I don't have to repeat what he said. Redundancy is not king sometimes, but it's an important point, man. Prepare yourselves. What is that quote? What is that phrase from? Did you ever see the movie Dark Territory with Steven Seagal?
Whoa, you're putting me on the spot. But
remember Dane? Remember Dane, the villain there? He said, what did he say? What was it? Something favors the prepared mind. What was that? I always try to remember that, and it's so relevant, and I can never remember it because my mind's too feeble. Anyway, somebody will pop on the stream, and they'll put it in here, I'm sure. Chance favors the prepared mind. I think that's it. No, that doesn't make any sense. Yeah, that's it, I think.
Could be.
Yeah. But, prepare yourselves, folks. Anyways, I'm out of here. Wave goodbye. Say goodbye to Roly. You guys.
Thank you, guys. Thank you very much.
I hope you guys on the stream appreciate this. Anyways, we'll see you later and have a good evening. And I'm just gonna shut her down. And I'm actually concerned about the wife because I didn't realize it was this late. Oh no, it's not late. It's only 5:06. Oh, I'm good. I don't have my phone with me, and I told her I'd have it with me in case she needed. The driveway is a solid blue sheet of ice. It is boilerplate, and she ain't getting up there with a car. So I'm going to have to walk. I'm going to have to skate down, basically, slide down on my shoes to the bottom and see if I can race that thing up and into the garage. So this should be entertaining. Next time I come on, the car will probably be destroyed because I'll crash coming into the garage. So there you go. We'll see you guys later. Have a good evening. 7-3, everybody.
Thank you, Steve.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks, Roly. My pleasure, man. And great to have you. And thanks to everybody watching and who chimed in. You guys take care. Adios.